I want to start out with a self-introduction. You might be wondering, who's this guy? What did John bring me here for? In May of 1982, I was a journeyman machinist. I was on the executive board of Machinist Local 79 here in Seattle. Went to work on a Friday morning. At 9 o'clock, they announced that we all needed to assemble in the largest room of the plant. We all assemble in the largest room. The owner gets up and says, I'm not making the rate of profit I want. I've decided to sell the assets and liabilities of the company. And one of the conditions of the sale is you're all fired as of 3:30. He then said, pointed to a guy, there was 3 suits there, 3 big kind of burly guys next to him. Turns to one of the suits and says, representative of the new owners, he has something he'd like to say to you. The suit gets up and he says, we have a unique problem. We have a new company and no employees. We would love to have you apply for jobs with the new company. If you'd like to do so, there's some young women over here. They've got personnel handbooks. Go up and sign up. So in order to get your unemployment pennies, you had to protect yourself, so we all signed up. We're then led back out into the plant, and we're forced to stand there one by one, including myself, while these new guys searched our toolboxes to make sure we didn't have any of their crappy tools. And when we're done, forced us to shut the toolbox, lock it, and then wrap duct tape around it to make sure we couldn't reopen it. Then by 2:30, they'd done this to everybody in the plant. They marched us out into the parking lot and said, see you later, have a good life. The next week I came in for a job interview, same management, new owners. Had a very short interview. They basically told me they wouldn't hire me because I was a union official. And when I told them it was illegal to tell me that, one of these weasels leaned forward and said, I said to him, you know it's illegal to tell me that? The guy leans forward and goes, you're the only witness. Well, I'm not a real big guy, but I was in pretty good shape. These guys are kind of scrawny and kind of old. I got up and started cursing at him with the sound of a Boeing jet engine. They thought I was going to pull a rod out and shoot him, I think. But I'm not a fool and I'm not stupid, but after 10 minutes I quit cursing at him and left. I spent 15 months out of work, lost 6 years on a pension, got pushed out of the trade. My local dropped from 4,000 to about 2,400 in about 2.5 years. My girlfriend broke up with me because I was too depressed, which was true. The next job I took a 55% pay cut. I swore that day that I would never shut up and never stop fighting for working people as long as I had a brain in my head and I was alive. That's who's talking to you today. Okay? So I can't speak personally of what you've just gone through, but I've walked down the hard road of taking a vicious beatdown from corporate America. And I'm here to say we got to turn this around and not let it happen to anybody ever again. I want to start out by asking you a few questions. Do you believe that a strong 751 and a strong labor movement has been good for your family and your community? Say yes.
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 I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. There's our first level of agreement and unity in the room. Second question. Do you believe Boeing's demands to give up your defined benefit pension and other concessions were unfair and unjust?
Yes.
I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody seems to be awake after having worked first shift. Okay? Do you believe that your union members and your union leaders and you, the members, need to build more power and strength to defeat Boeing if they come back in here and say, well, let's get rid of the dental plant or whatever?
Yes. Yes.
Can't hear you?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a third level of agreement. Now, the fourth question I have for you, do you believe that a divided union membership will make it harder to build the power to resist more demands for concessions from Boeing and to move forward, regain ground, and organize the non-union supply chains?
Yes. Yes.
I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. We have a lot of unity in this room despite the horrible thing that Boeing has done to you and the anger and division and frustration that a lot of members may feel. And that to remain divided is to play into the hands of the company. Not that anybody is intending to do that, but that can be the effect. Okay? So how do we move past that? And obviously this is part of a start that John and the folks are leading. Let me start with a quote from George Santayana. Those who cannot learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Those who do not remember their past are condemned to repeat their mistakes. I'm going to show you the game films of the history of working people to try and build the American dream. Okay? It's our story. And no good pro team would not look at game films. look at our offense and defense and the other team's offense and defense. I'm saying we need to look at our own game films to understand what we've done in the past and what we can do and what our enemies are trying to do to us. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "The labor movement was the principal force that transformed misery and despair into hope and progress. The captains of industry did not lead this transformation." Well, let's bring that right down into this hall. It is your predecessors in your union and you folks today that built the American dream, and the Jim McNerneys had nothing to do with it, and all they're doing is to try and destroy it. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Okay. So, you, us, collectively are the leaders of the fight for the American dream for yourselves, your families, and the communities, and the people that you love and care about. So I'm from Chicago. A lot of my people are from Detroit. I'm going to tell you a Midwest story, but you all have your own family stories of what happened to you and your people. Let's go to 1915 in Chicago, the meatpacking industry. It's the largest concentration of meatpacking in the world. They have 5 strikes for recognition with tens of thousands of workers. 1894, 1904, 1917, 1921, and 1923. They lost all 5 strikes. And what was going on in part? Read the quote from Philip Armour, who's the CEO of the biggest company. "We pursue policies to keep the races and nationalities apart, stir up suspicion, rivalry, and hatred among them." This guy was a white-collar racist. He was a white-collar union buster and was vicious and evil. And he said, if we can keep the workers split up and fighting amongst themselves, we win. So what happens? The Irish are fighting the Germans, and the Germans are fighting the Italians, and the Italians are fighting the Greeks, and the Greeks are fighting the Jews. And a whole bunch of white folks can come together and blame it on those black folk. And if there's any Latinos around here, we'll dig one of them up and blame them. Okay? And when they did that, and a lot of workers bought into this, they played into the hands of the bosses and got smashed. And the American dream wasn't very real for them in the brutal conditions, long hours, and low wages of the packing industry. Does this sound vaguely familiar?
Yeah,
Okay, like today. So let's go to 1925 in Detroit. My grandfather, Grandpa Wabel, is working in Michigan Central. He's a union man, making pretty good money, but down the road is Ford's, and Ford's is non-union, making $5 a day for an 8-hour shift, which was really big money, and they guaranteed lifetime employment. So Grandpa quits working at the union job and goes to work at Ford's, and for the next 4 years they do really well. They buy a little house, they buy a Model A, they buy an icebox, and they buy a radio, and they're living the American dream. Who needs unions? Who needs unions? Because the company will take care of us. Well, I see some people nodding their heads, like, well, maybe not. Well, let's see what happens. So the Depression comes, and Mr. Ford turns out to be a pathological liar. Now, by 1931, he's laid off Grandpa and 91,000 of his co-workers out of 128,000. That's 70% unemployment rate out of Ford, similar for Chrysler and GM and the supply chains. And Mr. Ford has the nerve to say, the average man won't really do a day's work unless he's caught and can't get out of it. There's plenty of work to do if people would do it. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. So Grandpa's one of these guys who's out actually looking for a job. He gets hit by a streetcar, suffers severe internal injuries, and they take him to the hospital. And guess what? He ain't got no money, he ain't got no health insurance, and they don't really have time for him. They kind of bandage him up, and they send him home, and they basically gave him a death sentence. Okay? Now, if he'd been Henry Ford, he would have got the best there was, but if he was just old Grandpa Wabel, he wasn't Henry. So he's living at home, he's dying, and our family is trying to survive on $22.50 a month, which is what you got from the welfare system in the city of Detroit. $4.50 a person. No unemployment insurance, no Medicaid, no Medicare, no disability insurance, no public housing, no food stamps. It is hell. If you think times are tough now, try and imagine what this looks like. So the working people, many of whom are unemployed, the employed and unemployed start working together and fighting back and fighting against evictions and fighting against foreclosures and making demands saying, we refuse to be treated like we're less than human.